What's going on, everybody? We have the meta snapshot for patch 13.13. This includes all the recent hotfixes that have been coming out. And also, I want to let you all know that this is a 3-week patch because of the July 4th weekend, I believe. So if there was ever a time to just like buckle down and learn some stuff, probably going to be this patch because the info is going to be relevant for like 1 extra week. But as stuff changes, as stuff always does, new comps always pop up, metas always develop. We'll be updating every single week just so you all are always up to date. But in the S tier, we're going to start off with the comps. Strategist Azir and Ionia Yasuo are by far the 2 best comps right now. Just very consistent, and they share a lot of items. You put like Rageblade on the back line, Titan's BT on someone up front, and it's pretty much good from there. Lots of other combos you could do too, but they're just pretty powerful, and there are a couple of different versions of them that you can kind of pivot into if you don't hit exactly what the comp calls for, and we'll go into all those differences after we go through this and the legend tier list. In the A tier, we have Noxus, Void Kaisa, Deadeye, Garen Reroll, Yordle Reroll. Still a good comp, this one. Challengers, Multicaster Reroll, very popular recently. Shurima. And then in the B tier, Ekko Reroll definitely got nerfed a lot. Gunners, I thought this was gonna be a little bit better, but I think they're slightly below average right now. That's kind of what the B tier kind of signifies, below average. Kalista Reroll, there are situations for it. I played it a couple times, but it's mainly just like a challenger build. And then if you're like, hey, I got 1 billion Kalistas, let me roll for it for free. But you're never like gunning for Kalista from the start. Karma Reroll, still pretty solid. Rogue Reroll, and then Demacia. And then in the C tier, we just have Teemo. And then build diff, probably going to be in the C tier right now, I'm going to be honest. Maybe the B tier? Maybe like low B tier. And then the rest probably like low B, high C, some of those. But let's move on into the legend tier list. So Draven got completely gutted. I wouldn't really pick Draven. I still see a lot of people playing it, but definitely not the best one by far anymore, where there are literally games where 8 players were going for Draven. And I had this a couple of games in a row before they fixed it. But Ezreal's probably going to be the best because his thing got buffed. And if you know how to use a lot of items, like Ezreal's pretty good. I really don't think anyone can kind of compete with Ezreal right now, but it's not the end of the world if you don't pick like the best legend, you know? Because there's still plenty of other good augments out there to take. Poro, I still think is really good. Personal favorite there. Ornn, I think is all right still. Obviously took a big hit. Eternal Winter's still good, but Sniper's Focus definitely took a big hit. Master Yi, solid. Vladimir, solid. Pengu, if you like loose streaking, I think Pengu's pretty good. And then Urf if you like YOLOing. In the B tier, we have Twisted Fate. Pretty big nerfs to TF. I think TF is supposed to be like a noob legend because you get to build the same exact items every game. And because of that, like they have to make him like a little weaker, right? I'm pretty sure he's like in a theoretical world, he should always be B tier. Lee Sin, good for rerolls only. Veigar, I feel like is a little worse version of Master Yi. Aurelion Sol got nerfed a bit in the recent hotfix. Draven, we already talked about. And then Bard, Tahm Kench, and Caitlyn. I think all of these just kind of suck right now. Doesn't mean there isn't a time and place for them, but definitely much weaker than the rest. But don't let any of this tier list stuff discourage you from playing your favorite legend because it barely makes a difference. Just like re-roll it and you're pretty much playing Poro -1 augment, you know? But check out the legend guide for more info on that. But let's move on into the comps. So starting out in the S tier, we have the Strategist Azir Lux. This comp definitely got a lot more popular towards the end of the last patch. Nothing crazy popular. It was kind of just like a A tier option, so to speak. But this one revolves mainly around 3 Demacia, 3 Shurima, so you have Azir and Lux carry. And then make sure to only put 2 items on Lux. You might be wondering like, hey, why doesn't Lux have like the 3rd item? It's just because you want the Demacia Radiant item on her, and because of that, you can only put 2 items on her. Full damage works, like 2 damage items, or you could have 1 mana item too. It doesn't really matter, just build whatever you can. For Azir, Rageblade plus 2 other items is gonna be great. Stuff like Giant Slayer, Guardbreaker, Hand of Justice, Hextech Gunblade, like they're all going to work on both Lux and Azir. Jeweled Gauntlet, Archangels, they also use like the same exact items, apart from the Rageblade and the Static Shiv, those just go on Azir. But any generic damage item will work on both of them. For tanks, it's going to be mainly Nasus being your main tank. The only issue with Nasus is that he doesn't really benefit from the Shurima trait because Shurima, when you only have 3 of them, it only affects 1 unit, which is going to be Azir, right? So I'd prioritize the tank items kind of last. You could also throw some tank items on Jarvan, so pretty much whoever you 2-star first, Jarvan or Nasus, are going to be holding all your items. Sometimes you could just put like a Protector's Vow on your Jarvan just so he gets his first cast off really quickly, and then stick every other tank item on Nasus, or even like Cassante if you have Cassante 2-star. Cassante 2-star definitely really powerful. Obviously, whenever you're playing Strategist, since it's a 2-3-4-5, you have a lot of flex spots. Like, you don't have to play Swain, you don't have to play Teemo. You can mix and match a lot of different champions. You could throw in like full legendaries like Ryze, Ahri, Aatrox, Sion, things like that. If you don't get Cassandra yet, you play a different Shurima unit. You can kind of match up a synergy with one of the complementary units. That'll work perfectly fine too. But pretty much just overall solid comp, lots of flex spots, and the only thing it's relying on is hitting forecasts. So obviously you want to do standard leveling because you're playing like 1, 2, 3, 4 forecasts that you kind of want to use. So it can be a little tricky getting your econ there. So definitely having like at least one econ augment is going to be making this comp a lot easier to play. But full guide written out here on the how to play section. If that wasn't enough already, head on over to the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta for all that info. I had someone ask me like, how do I access this? But I pretty much always say it's available on the website. But just in case you haven't checked it out yet, I would definitely do. And of course, we always have the item recommendations down here. Let's move on into the next comp though, because even though this one's a newish comp, it's pretty easy to play. But the next build up we have is Yasuo Ionia. Personally, like one of my biggest go-tos, I think this might be one of my most played. You itemize Yasuo and Kaisa as your main carries, and then I don't really care that much about tank items, so if you do have tank items, just throw them on Shen. Literally anything. It's literally your leftover items. So if you have like a Gargoyle Stoneplate, if you have a Warmogs, whatever combination of tank items it is, just build it on Shen to get value out of it right away. Don't make perfect Shen items. Make perfect Yasuo and Kaisa items instead. Since you're running 4 Challenger, you don't really need Rageblade for Kaisa. That's a mistake I see people making a lot. People like go out of their way to build a Rageblade for Kaisa, but I feel like just having like 3 regular items are just much better on her. For Yasuo, it's just the BT Titan's gonna be the best build. Then third item can be anything. It could be something like an Edge and Knight, as you see here, or it could be something like a Deathblade, Infinity Edge, anything that does damage, or like a second Titans. All those work fine. And to play this, it's obviously like a lot easier if you have Ionia start. However, that doesn't happen that often, but if you get Challenger start, it's really easy to pivot into this as well. If you do the Challenger start, you're generally playing around your Kaisa more. If you're doing the Ionia start, you're playing more so around your Yasuo. So see who you 2-star first, Kaisa or Yasuo, and then kind of try to build your team around that. Kalista's a great item holder for Kaisa, and because Kalista's a 3-cost unit, you could kind of sell her and then find her again to move the items over, because she could hold like all the good AP items. For all the AD items, like Warwick's very powerful, and you could even play Warwick instead of Kalista, because the difference in the late game between Kalista and Warwick isn't really much. For all your AD items, you could also use Zed, so you have a lot of different options there. Best emblem and spatula holders. So obviously, Ionia Kaisa could be really good, but if you ever get Aphelios 2-star, you could take out your Kaisa and play Aphelios instead of her, and then drop down to 2 Challenger, just have Aurelia and Yasuo, and just play 6 Ionia with 2 Deadeye. Here, I'll show you right now because you could click on these links in the website. So pretty much drop Kaisa, drop Kalista. Then what you want to do is add in Aphelios and add in Taric. So this is going to give you Sorc, this is going to give you Deadeye, Bastion, and Targon. But I would kind of only do this if you have the Ionia emblem. So drop that on Aphelios. A lot of people like building Rageblade on Aphelios, but when you have the Ionia thing, it gives you attack speed. So you do not need Rageblade on Aphelios in this specific build. In other builds, you do need it, but in this one, you don't. And then for items, you just do any generic like damage items. It could be like Giant Slayer, it could be Deathblade, any AD item's gonna do. And then since you notice you have 7 Ionia, if you don't have Ahri yet, well, you could just play this board without the Ahri. And if you do have the Ahri, you could drop set and then add in whatever you want. Maybe like a Ryze or something like that, Heimerdinger, pretty much anything like that. But let's move back into the main website, standard leveling pattern as per usual. And then we have a bunch of other item recommendations down here. The core is obviously just 6 Ionia, and then you kind of just mix and match there. One last thing I want to mention is that sometimes you want to use Karma as like one of your main carries if you're playing a top 4. So actually, let's go back into here. In the mid game, sometimes you don't have your Kaisa fully set up. So what you're gonna do instead is play a Karma. And when you do that, you kind of just put all your AP items that you used to have on someone else just on her instead. It's not the best, but sometimes you just have to make the most of what you have. And some games you just don't hit the Kaisa 2-star. So you could always just put the leftover AP items onto Karma. Again, not ideal, but it definitely is an option that you have. Let's move on into the A tier. We have Noxus Reroll. So Noxus Reroll, very easy to play because you're just going for 3-cost reroll. And to do that, you just stack Darius and Katarina. You have to see who you 3-star first. So if you 3-star Darius first, definitely add in like other juggernauts. But if you 3-star Katarina first, definitely play a rogue such as Ekko. So another thing you have to keep in mind whenever you're playing 3-cost reroll is you need to know when to give up on some of the 3-stars because it's just really expensive holding every unit. And some games you're just not going to hit everything 3-star. So if you hit one of them to 3-star and then you have like, let's say 4 copies of the other unit, you probably should just level up instead and just give up on the other unit. However, if you have like 1 3-star and then the other one you have like 7 copies of, maybe continue to keep rolling because there's a pretty good chance that you can actually hit the other unit. So you kind of have to like check out your econ, check out your HP, and see if you have time to actually complete everything 3-star because obviously the stuff on your bench that you're holding doesn't actually help your board. So you have to kind of figure out when to commit and when to give up on something. But for more info on that, like do check out the like leveling guide. And we also have like this leveling pattern link on the site. So you can just click on like 3-cost reroll if you don't know when to level up at each stage. But one thing about Noxus is that it's very reliant on having like good openers because you need to be able to get Noxus early and then also win a couple of rounds because the way the Noxus trait works is you gain Noxus stacks based on unique opponents that you defeat. So the more opponents you defeat, the stronger your units get. So it's really just like a very snowball-y type of trait that you kind of have to get like a little high roll with. But let's move on into the items. We have that listed down here. Katarina, I definitely just like 1 healing item on her, such as the Hextech Gunblade, and then just full damage after that. You could also build stuff like Ionic Spark that's not listed over here. And then on Darius, Titan's Resolve is probably his best item, followed by Bloodthirster. And then I like Infinity Edge, but some people like other items instead. But any third item should be a damage item for sure. And I mean like a pure damage item, not something that's like half and half. But let's move on into the next comp, which is Void Kaisa. So Void Kaisa, pretty simple to play. It really likes a portal that gives extra trait bonuses because it's really easy to hit 8 Void in that way. So I believe that's called like Placidium Library, and there's something else that kind of does the same thing. But generally, I like playing this from a Bruiser start, and because of that, you get both Rek'Sai and Cho'Gath, plus like maybe like a Malzahar to hold your items, and that's going to be an easy way to kind of pivot into 6 or 8 Void. I think 8 Void is a lot better than 6 Void. If you're playing 6 Void, I'd rather play something like 6 Bruiser instead and just run Kaisa carry with 6 Bruiser or Rek'Sai carry with 6 Bruiser. I think both those versions are pretty valid. But overall, you're just kind of just playing regular TFT out here. The only problem with the 6 Bruiser version is that it relies on hitting Scion, so if you don't have a +1 Bruiser, it's kind of hard to play. Both these comps rely on hitting Kaisa, which is a little difficult because almost every comp likes Kaisa. Challengers like Kaisa, Ionians like Kaisa, and because of that, it makes it more difficult to hit, and I feel like the reward from Void is a little less than the reward from like the Ionia comp, for example. So that means I really only play Void if you have a +1 Void augment or like an emblem from some random thing, because I don't really think it's worth it otherwise. I definitely think the Baron's worth it, but the Rift Herald probably not as good unless it's only in the mid game. Notice how Kaisa's items are a little different than her Challenger build. The reason why is because Challengers give attack speed, and if you're running 4 or 6 Challenger, you don't need as much attack speed in her itemization as you do if you have only 2 Challengers. So whenever you're running 2 Challenger Kaisa, definitely build the Rage Blade on her so she could kind of stack up throughout the fight. And you also have a big tank in the Baron or Rift Herald, so it gives her a lot more time to stack up. And then after that, just add in 2 more items. That's pretty much it, but it's a pretty solid comp overall. Next up we have is the Deadeye comp. So the Gunner comp got nerfed. AD path was very popular last patch, but right now I think out of Aphelios versus Zeri, Aphelios is definitely a lot better right now. You could kind of just use the same build. It's just like Deadeye plus tanks. It really doesn't matter which, but probably the Freljord version is going to be the best because Ashe is a Freljord and a Deadeye, and then you just add in like the other ones because it's so easy to get. This comp is just like a little difficult though because you have to hit a lot of different forecasts, and you have to get good items on your Aphelios as well. Sometimes you run into a lot of awkward situations where all your tanks are upgraded but none of your backlines are, or all your backliners are upgraded and none of your tanks are, and both those situations are very, very, very bad. For example, I feel like 1-star Aphelios tickles people, whereas 1-star Azir, I find Azir can still kill a couple of things. So that's like one of the big power differences between the Deadeye comp in the A tier versus the Strategist comp in the S tier. But they play kind of the same standard leveling pattern because you're going for 4-cost units, but instead of AP items for Lux and Azir, you go for AD items for Aphelios and Urgot. So it's best to kind of like flex into these two comps. Maybe you could build a Rage Blade in the early game, some tank items, and then during your roll down, see if you're hitting Aphelios or the Azir, and then switch to each of those builds after that. So if you do like Rage Blade Giant Slayer or Rage Blade Hextech Gunblade, Guard Breaker, Hand of Justice, all those like generic good offensive items, you can kind of flex into a lot of different builds, which is kind of a good way to play. Next up, we have Garen Reroll. Garen Reroll definitely got hit a lot because of Zeke's Heralds got nerfed a bit. But if you do manage to hit him, it's very, very powerful still. There's not really too much else to say. A very easy comp, just 3-cost reroll, and then you just need Bloodthirster and Rage Blade on Garen, and then use the Radiant item or add like your own third item. It's up to you. Essentially, none of this other stuff matters unless you actually hit Garen 3-star, but I think 3 Demacia plus 6 Juggernaut is the best way to kind of play him because you really only care about one unit on your team. So only go for this if you have like a bunch of Garens early on. A lot of people, they force 3-cost reroll just because they got them from an early box on stage 1. And sometimes it works out, but a lot of times it's better to like lean into that line of play, but then later on realize if you're not actually hitting your Garen 2-star early on, you probably should pivot into something else. And it's no shame to, because if you build Rage Blade and Bloodthirster on Garen, it's not that big of a deal to pivot into other comps because you haven't wasted any gold rerolling for him by the time you hit like stage 3 or something like that, maybe like late or mid stage 3. And then you can kind of hold on to other units and pivot into other stuff instead, because tons of comps use the same items as what Garen uses. But let's move on into the next build. This is Yordle Reroll. Yordle Reroll definitely got nerfed because On a Roll got nerfed, and I think Tristana's 4-star got hit just a tiny bit. I think the comp is still very good though, especially since a lot less players are playing it now. So it's a bit uncontested, and you might only see like one or even none of these players in each of your games. So if you do go for it, you might likely just be the only one there. To do this, you play with a 1-cost reroll pattern, so you pretty much do not level up, and then you roll down at stage 3-1 to 30 gold, and then slow roll back to 50 after that. Keep in mind, you want to just focus on having Poppy, Maokai, Viego, Tristana, +1 Yordle in the early game. Don't worry too much about all the other gunners at that point quite yet, because the gunners are just there to add the trait. You don't really care about the actual unit. So always hold on to the 1-cost units plus maybe 1 Yordle, just so you could play it once you hit everything 3-star, and then you spike really hard whenever you get 4-star Tristana. I have a gameplay video over here if you want to check that out. I'll also leave a card up here for those all interested. But next up, we have the Challenger build. So Challenger build is very similar to the Ionia build, except you run like 4 or 6 Challenger. I like running 6 Challenger in the mid to late game, but then in the super late game, you want to take out this Samira, you want to take out maybe the Warwick or Kalista, and then run some like legendary units instead. So you could run like Ryze, you could run Aatrox, Heimerdinger, literally anyone that's not these dog units, because you don't need the 6 Challenger bonus that much. But it's pretty much the same as the Ionia comp, you just run Challengers instead. Yasuo and Kaisa are still the main carries, and then yeah, there's not really much after that. So this one's pretty easy to kind of go over. But next comp up we have is the Multicaster Reroll. There are essentially 2 versions of this build. One is like the Sona Vel'Koz version, the other one is the Taliyah Teemo version. So it depends if you want to do 2-cost or 3-cost reroll. So if you ever get like a good multicaster augment in the early game, such as like Multicaster Heart, or like maybe like the, I forget what this one's called. It's like the trait related augment that's not like a +1, but if you do get one of those, you kind of have to decide whether you're going for the 3-cost version or the 2-cost version. They both work out pretty well, but they do build a little bit differently. But this comp is kind of like a high roll comp. It's very situational. You pretty much just have to hit all the 3-stars, and you just need like probably 1 good econ augment or 2 half econ augments in order to kind of meet that criteria. But there's probably better stuff to play in most cases. Next comp up we have is the Shurima comp. This is my favorite comp. This goes like 5 or 7 Shurima. This did get buffed a little bit, but probably like the Lux version is still a little bit better. So if you want to actually get to 5 Shurima, just play like the top version, but get a Shurima emblem and then play an extra Shurima instead of like 4 strategists. Maybe run like 3 strategists, put in like a Taliyah instead of Swain or something like that, and then put the emblem on like maybe your Jarvan or something like that. But going back into the Shurima comp, you just really need Azir carry to kind of pop off. Nasus is pretty good at holding like the Bloodthirster Titans. That's really common right now. And then regular tank items is probably going to go on your Shen. You could also run Sejuani. You don't have to run Shen because like you run Renekton sometimes in the Shurima build. So whoever you 2-star first is going to do just fine. Standard leveling for this one, but it plays just like any other regular TFT comp. Onto the B tier, we have Ekko Reroll. This one got a pretty big nerf, so I wouldn't recommend playing this unless you get like a ton of Echoes. And by a ton, I mean probably like 5 by the time you hit like maybe stage 4-1. If you have like 5 Echoes and you have good items for Ekko, then yeah, try to go for it. But if you have any less than that, I probably wouldn't really do this. But the build is essentially just Jeweled Gauntlet plus 2-handed Justices. If you have like Twisted Fate, probably like a decent legend to kind of get this. The reason why it works is because the Handed Justices give more crit, so you could reach like 100% crit with this build, and it gives Ekko some healing. Katarina is a good secondary carry. She just works like how any other Katarina carry comp works. She just deals a lot of damage, and you just need the Rogue to give her some survivability. They did change Piltover a little bit, so I'm thinking maybe you could sell the T-Hex after a certain point too, if you really need more gold to hit your Ekko. So some games where you high roll, you get the T-Hex that's buffed up and you have Ekko 3-star, but then there's some other games where you might have to sell the T-Hex and then kind of forget about Piltover after that. Other good items in this comp is going to be the Chalice of Power, though it did get nerfed for this specific comp because it gives less AP now. But yeah, very high roll comp. I would only go for this if I have like at least 5 Echoes on stage 4-1. Next up we have Gunners. This is like the tragic comp of this patch because it was played so much last patch and it was very good, but they did over nerf it a little bit, it seems. I thought it was actually going to be like perfectly average. I thought it was going to be sitting at like low A tier, but it definitely is below average right now, I would say. I think it's because Zeri relies a lot on her execute, so maybe she was just cleaning up too many fights because she like snowballs and then like executes a bunch of people really quickly, and then like if the numbers get changed like even a little bit, they obviously got changed a lot, but like I feel like it's a little bit more delicate to kind of balance those things. Zeke's also got to change, but I feel like if you're running Jace, you could still run the Zeke's because it just goes hand in hand with this champion. Another great thing about Zeri is that she could kind of use any item or any AD or AS item. You don't really need specific ones to get her to really pop off. But you play this the same exact way you did last week, so let's go on into the next comp, which is Kalista Reroll. So Kalista Reroll, you definitely want Shadow Isles active. The 6 Challenger version also works, but I think 6 Shadow Isle is even better than 6 Challenger. Obviously, you need a spatula for it, but I feel like if you get it, it's very good. I pretty much go for this comp when I get a Shadow Isle emblem, or if I just have a ton of Kalistas and I'm not really going for a Challenger build with Kaisa and Yasuo. Obviously, you're still playing Challengers, but if you get a ton of like healing items, it's nice to play Gwen instead because Gwen can make use of stuff like Hextech Gunblade, Handed Justice really well because she's always going to be closer to the action, and therefore she takes a little bit of damage. Overall, I think this is like a really fun build, but it definitely is a little bit worse than the other Challenger builds out there. This is a 3-cost reroll, so just go to level 7 and roll it down, and if you don't have many copies of Kalista, maybe go to level 8 and then roll for her there. Same kind of rules as the Ekko though. If you have like 5 Kalistas on stage 4-1, you could probably potentially go for this. And I mean at the beginning of stage 4-1, not like after you do a roll down. If you have like 5 copies at the beginning before you do a roll down and you have a ton of gold, then yeah, I'd probably go for this comp. If not, probably something else would do better. Karma Reroll, I feel like this one is in an awkward spot. Invokers give a lot of mana to your units, so you get a lot of AP sometimes by building a lot of chalices, but chalices got nerfed a little bit. So it's a little tricky in that sense because a lot of the ways you get free AP got removed. So maybe you pretty much have to have an Archangel Staff whenever you run this build now, because you really don't get AP in any other way unless you have the Augment Loving Invocation, which is this gold one right here on the side. There are also a lot of fights where Karma barely doesn't one-tap the backline with a spell crit, and then they heal up with like a Hextech Gunblade or something like that, and then all her damage is kind of wasted. So this comp, definitely really good in the like the mid to late game, but I feel like in the super late game, unless you have like the perfect items, perfect build, it's kind of hard to really pop off with this comp. But I think overall it's still pretty solid. I definitely would play this every now and then, just nothing like too often. But if you ever get like a good reroll augment, such as like Golden Ticket or March of Progress, definitely something to look into. Next up we have is Rogue Reroll. There's a lot of like weird popularity in Zed popping up every now and then. I don't think it's like that great, but it's definitely like pretty solid. It's not my first choice of a comp, but I think there is a lot of potential in Zed. The thing about 4 Rogue is that like I don't think the 4 Rogue trait bonus is really that great to like kind of stretch your team for, because like a lot of the units, they all just do damage. Viego, Zed, Katarina, and Ekko, they don't provide like that much utility. So unless you are able to itemize all of them, I don't think the comp works that great, because it's like you have too many 3 stars. So maybe you want to play some sort of like legend that revolves around giving a lot of items. That might kind of help you fill a lot of those spots, or like only play this on portals that give a lot of items. Because if you ever go for like 3-star comps with like a lot of different 3 stars, you definitely want items on them, because it's like not worth the gold to 3-star them otherwise. But to play this comp, you want to slow roll at level 6 for Z3, or slow roll at level 7 for Katarina, or you can do both if you have like a lot of econ, or if you hit Zed really early on. If you are doing Zed carry, I think the Slayer trait is like a little bit of a bait, because it's a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 synergy, but it really doesn't give you that much after like 2 Slayer. It gives you like 10% more damage, but a lot of the Slayer units kind of suck, so I don't really like playing them. So are you really going to play like a Kayle or like a Gwen with no items? Probably not. So you probably just stick with this team that you see here, unless you get some crazy spatulas or something like that. Next up we have is Demacia. This kind of falls into the same category as the pure Shurima comp. Like Demacia is just better with a duo carry, and Shurima is just better with a duo carry, and Shurima and Demacia just kind of complement each other a lot. So it's much better just to play the combined build instead of like the dedicated vertical builds right now, unless someone finds out like a weird way to kind of boost this comp into the next level. Overall, still a decent comp to go for in a worst case scenario, so I'm going to leave it up here. And of course, you do the standard leveling pattern, because you're going for a bunch of 4 costs with Jarvan and Lux. After that, we have Teemo in the C tier. I should make the Talia build. We'll probably get that going next week, so definitely look out for that. I think that build is like pretty interesting and fun to play. But going on back into the summary, for Legends, again, like probably going to be Ezreal. Draven got nerfed, so we don't have to worry about that. But for the comps, like, yeah, just build the same items as you did last patch, but instead of putting them on Aphelios and Zeri, you're going to put them on Azir and Kaisa. And for the bruiser items, like Yasuo still uses them really well. In the Strategist Azir comp, I'm pretty sure like Nasus can use it okay. And it still works in the old comps that they were used in before. But if you want further info on like the gradings of all the tiers, head on over to my Patreon or OnlyFans, because if you want to know what's like S+, A-, B+, B-, instead of just like having them in this SABC format, definitely go there for if you want like the exact ratings. But that's going to be it from me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you all next time.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.